Hello everyone, this is Iran Talk, and in this video I'd like to take a look at the genetic origins of contemporary Iranians. And what you will see from my analysis is that contemporary Iranians have significant genetic continuity, often exceeding 90%, and in the majority of the samples actually exceeding 95%. In fact, as you will see, contemporary Iranians are very close genetically to the Iron Age Iranian samples we have from northwestern Iran, from the sites of Dinka Tepe, Haji Firuz Tepe, and Tepe Hasanlu, as well as the medieval era isolated Iranians which were found in the caves of Ganj Dara and Kalmakare. Again, as is the trend with my previous videos, and to maintain uniformity amongst the videos in this series, I have decided to use a distal model or a Neolithic, Mesolithic, and ancient population model. And the reason for this is because I want to show how much Iranian ancestry is actually related to the ancient populations from Iran, as opposed to how much ancestry Iranians have from later groups which were very much admixed. So think of the calculator being used in this video primarily being made up of unadmixed sources. Thus, as I will prove, the contemporary Iranians are indeed the direct descendants of the ancient Iranians, and there's no doubt about this. And they also have minimal non-Iranian ancestry. And what this means is that Iranians have maintained uniformity and continuity since the ancient period, despite the significant losses of life during the Turco-Mongol invasions as well as the Arab invasions before that. I am of course referring to genetic uniformity and continuity. Now, without further ado, I'd like to begin my genetic analysis. To begin, here are the distal source populations that I will be utilizing, and I will not really elaborate on them any further, but I think that if you're more interested in learning about each of these components individually, you can email me at irantalk95@gmail.com, but I can assure you every single or nearly every single ancient population that is relevant to the ethnic makeup of Iranians was included here. Now I will just present the results for the Iron Age and medieval Iranians for you to compare to the modern day Iranians. So here are the ones for the Iron Age Iranians, and they're on average 35.6% Iran Neolithic, 30.6% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 15.7% Georgia Mesolithic, 9.8% Yamnayan, and 8.3% Natufian. Moving on, here are the results for the medieval Iranians, and they're on average 35.3% Iran Neolithic, 35% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 11.9% Yamnayan, 10.8% Georgia Mesolithic, 6.4% Natufian, and 0.6% Mongolia North Neolithic. As you will see with the modern Iranians, they're very close to the genetic profile of both these samples as well as the Iron Age Iranians, and this is evidence for significant continuity in Iran since the ancient era. To begin with the genetic analysis of contemporary Iranians, these are all of the samples from the Mariupolis dataset, which is not directly from Davitsky. Nonetheless, he was the one who converted these to the Global 25. Unfortunately, unlike my later analysis of the samples that were directly from Davitsky, we do not have the individual samples for these particular population averages directly available to us, so I will just take a look at their averages. Nearly all modern Iranian populations are accounted for with this particular dataset, but unfortunately I did not include any of the Azerbaijani samples, but I will be including them later on in this analysis, including the entire dataset from Davitsky's individuals collection, so do look forward to that. But nonetheless, these samples are primarily Persians and related groups such as the Lurs, the Laks, as well as the Mazandaranis and the Gilakis. The Iranians in Mariupolis' dataset are on average 38.9% Iran Neolithic, 29.9% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 14.7% Yamnayan, 8.6% Georgia Mesolithic, 5.2% Natufian, 1.5% Mongolia North Neolithic, 1.1% Ong Modern, and 0.0% Ibero-Maurutian. Thus, the Iranians in the Mariupolis dataset have significant continuity at 97.4%, and this is very interesting. As you can see, the only recent ancestry in Iranians comes from a Mongolian North Neolithic source at 1.5% and an Ong Modern source at 1.1%. Now here are the genetic results for the Iranians, particularly the Persians and related groups in Davitsky's dataset, and he hasn't updated this in a while, but nonetheless these samples are on average 39.2% Iran Neolithic, 29.3% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 14.4% Yamnayan, 8.9% Georgia Mesolithic, 6.0% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 1.4% Mongolia North Neolithic, and 0.8% Ong Modern. Thus, the Iranians of today in Davitsky's dataset have significant genetic continuity. In fact, these samples have more genetic continuity than the samples from the Moriopolis collection, which is very interesting as the Mongolia North Neolithic and Ong modern ancestry together are only at around 2.2% and are thus minimal, and for this reason, Iranians of today are very genetically contiguous as mentioned. Now, to begin with the genetic analysis of the individual samples, here are the results for the Iranians from the central part of Iran, and most of these are from actually the Isfahan province, and they're on average 35.5% Iran Neolithic, 30.8% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 14.6% Yamnayan, 9.4% Georgia Mesolithic, 6.1% Natufian, 2.8% Mongolia North Neolithic, 0.6% Ong Modern, and 0.1% Ibero-Mauritian. Thus, these results prove that the Central Iranians of today have significant genetic continuity. Here are the results for what should in theory be a more admixed population, and these are the cosmopolitan Tehranis of various backgrounds, and nonetheless despite this they also have a lot of genetic uniformity. The cosmopolitan Tehranis are on average 35.4% Iran Neolithic, 30.7% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 13.5% Yamnayan, 11.6% Georgia Mesolithic, 5.8% Natufian, 2.3% Mongolia North Neolithic, 0.6% Ong Modern, and 0.1% Ibero-Mauritian. Thus, much like the urban Asfahanis, the urban Tehranis have significant genetic continuity, and this is despite the fact, as mentioned, they're from cities, which in theory should be more admixed, but they're really not. Here are the results for the Bakhtiari Lors. We only have 2 of these samples in the dataset, but nonetheless, I think they give us a fairly good idea of the genetic profile of this particular population. The Bakhtiaris are on average 39.8% Iran Neolithic, 30.9% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 11.8% Georgia Kotias Mesolithic, 9.2% Yamnayan, 8.0% Natufian, and 0.3% Mongolia North Neolithic. Thus, the Iranian Bakhtiaris have significant genetic continuity as they have no Ong-related ancestry, and their Mongolia North Neolithic ancestry is only at 0.3%. The next population analyzed here are the Lors from Khorramabad, and they're on average 38.5% Iran Neolithic, 32.5% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 10.9% Caucasian Hunter-Gatherer, 9.3% Yamnayan, 7.1% Natufian, 1.4% Mongolia North Neolithic, and 0.4% Ong Modern. Thus, the Lords of Khorramabad have significant genetic continuity, and their profile does not really differ from the more urban populations of Iran as previously analyzed from Isfahan and Tehran, and what this suggests is that there's uniformity amongst the Iranian population genetically, be they from the rural areas or be they from the urban centers. Here are the results for the Iranian Mazandaranis, and they're on average 44.8% Iran Neolithic, 28.7% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 12.3% Georgia Mesolithic, 11.0% Yamnayan, 1.7% Natufian, Epipaleolithic, 0.8% Mongolia North Neolithic, 0.5% Ong Modern, and 0.0% Ibero-Mauritian. Thus, the Mazandaranis have a genetic profile which is very similar to other Iranians, and this is despite their historical isolation. Another Iranian population that has maintained significant genetic continuity are the Iranian Persians from Fars, and they're on average 39.3% Iran Neolithic, 29.4% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 15.7% Yamnayan, 8.5% Georgia Mesolithic, 6.3% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 0.6% Ong Modern, and 0.2% Mongolia North Neolithic. Thus, the Iranian Persians from Fars have maintained significant genetic continuity as their Ong, modern and Mongolia North Neolithic ancestry is only at 0.8% cumulatively, and what this means is that the Iranian Persians from Fars are 99.2% genetically contiguous. And this is despite the fact that historically the Fars province has been open to many invasions. Here are the results for the Iranian Persians from Khorasan, and they're on average 40.6% Iran Neolithic, 24.5% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 20.2% Yamnayan, 6% Ong Modern, 3.8% Georgia Mesolithic, 2.8% Natufian Epipaleolithic, and 2.0% Mongolia North Neolithic. Thus, the Iranian Persians from Khorasan have significant steppe ancestry which is higher than the average in other populations, but despite this they also have more Ong modern as well as more East Asian ancestry which cumulatively totals to 8%, but nonetheless they're still largely genetically contiguous. Much like the Iranian Persians from Khorasan, the Iranian Persians from Shiraz also have a bit more admixture compared to the other populations. Nonetheless, they are still largely genetically contiguous overall. The Iranian Persians from Shiraz are on average 38% Iran Neolithic, 26.4% Anatolian Late Neolithic, 13.6% Yamnayan, 9.3% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 8.7% Georgia Mesolithic, 2.1% Mongolia North Neolithic, 1.8% Ong Modern, and 0.2% Ibero-Mauritian. Thus, the Iranian Persians from Shiraz are largely genetically contiguous despite having elevated amounts of Natufian ancestry in comparison to other Iranian populations. They nonetheless have minimal Ong Modern and Mongolia North Neolithic ancestries. The second to last of the Persian populations analyzed here are the Iranian Persians from Yazd. The Iranian Persians from Yazd are on average 39.3% Iran Neolithic, 29.7% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 17.6% Yamnayan, 6.3% Georgia Mesolithic, 5.0% Natufian, 1.4% Mongolia North Neolithic, 0.7% Ong Modern, and 0.0% Ibero-Mauritian. Thus, the Iranian Persians from Yazd have significant genetic continuity, and they also have significant Yamnayan ancestry in comparison to other Iranian populations. Nonetheless, the Iranian Persians from Yazd have a genetic profile which is akin to other Iranian populations thus far analyzed. Now here are the results for the Iranian Zoroastrians, and they're on average 37.4% Iran Neolithic, 29.4% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 17.6% Yamnayan, 8.2% Georgia Mesolithic, 6.6% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 0.4% Mongolia North Neolithic, and 0.4% Ong Modern. Thus, the Iranian Zoroastrians have a genetic profile which is very much akin to the other Iranians thus far analyzed. The next Iranian population I'd like to take a look at are the Kurds, particularly the Failis from Elam and the Soranis from West Azerbaijan. The Iranian Kurds are on average 34.1% Iran Neolithic, 33.2% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 12.2% Georgia Mesolithic, 12.1% Yamnayan, 7.6% Natufian Epipaleolithic, and 0.8% Mongolia North Neolithic. Here are the results for the individual Faili samples, and they're on average 34.9% Iran Neolithic, 32.9% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 13.7% Georgia Mesolithic, 10.9% Yamnayan, 6.9% Natufian Epipaleolithic, and 0.8% Mongolia North Neolithic. Thus, despite their tribalism, the Faili Kurds have a genetic profile which is very much akin to that of the other Iranians thus far analyzed. As for the Soranis from West Azerbaijan, they're on average 33.6% Iran Neolithic, 33.3% Anatolia Neolithic, 13% Yamnayan, 10.9% Georgia Mesolithic, 8.1% Natufian Epipaleolithic, and 1.0% Mongolia North Neolithic. Thus, the Soranis from Azerbaijan are very much genetically an Iranian population. Now I'd like to take a look at the genetic origins of the Iranian Azerbaijanis. The Iranian Azerbaijanis are on average 34.2% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 27.2% Iran Neolithic, 14.5% Georgia Mesolithic, 12.1% Yamnayan, 6.1% Natufian, and 5.9% Mongolia North Neolithic. The individual Azerbaijani samples from Ardabil are on average 33.8%, Anatolia Late Neolithic 27.7%, Iran Neolithic 15.2%, Georgia Mesolithic 11.1%, Yamnayan 6.5%, Natufian Epipaleolithic 5.6%, Mongolia North Neolithic, and only 0.2% Ong Modern. Thus, these results prove that the Iranian Azerbaijanis from Ardabil are largely genetically contiguous, though with elevated amounts of ancestry from an Anatolia Late Neolithic source as well as a Mongolia North Neolithic source. Moving on, here are the genetic results for the Azerbaijanis from East Azerbaijan in Iran, and they're on average 36%, Anatolia Late Neolithic 28.7%, Iran Neolithic 13.4%, Georgia Mesolithic 11.5%, Yamnayan 5.9%, Mongolia North Neolithic 4.4%, Natufian Epipaleolithic, and 0.2% Ong Modern. Thus, genetically, the Azerbaijanis from East Azerbaijan are very close to the Iranian Azerbaijanis from Ardabil, and this is very interesting, and this again suggests that despite significant continuity, they yet again have elevated Anatolian as well as Mongolia North Neolithic ancestry. The last Iranian Azerbaijani population analyzed here are the Azerbaijanis from Western Azerbaijan from the city of Maku. They are on average 32.8% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 25% Iran Neolithic, 15.2% Georgia Mesolithic, 13.6% Yamnayan, 7.3% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 5.7% Mongolia North Neolithic, and 0.4% Ong Modern. Thus, the Iranian Azerbaijanis from Maku have a genetic profile which is very much akin to that of the other Azerbaijanis analyzed here. The second to last Iranian population analyzed here are the Iranian Bandaris from the southern coast of Iran, particularly from the provinces of Hormuzgan and Bushehr. The Iranian Bandaris are on average 51.8% Iran Neolithic, 21% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 14.4% Yamnayan, 7.6% Ong Modern, 2.2% Ibero-Mauritian from the Paleolithic, 1.6% Ancient Sub-Saharan African from Ethiopia, and 1.4% Natufian Epipaleolithic. As you can see, in comparison to the other Iranian populations analyzed here, the Bandaris have more foreign ancestry, particularly from an Ong Modern, an Ibero-Mauritian Paleolithic, as well as a Sub-Saharan African Ethiopian source as previously mentioned. In fact, the Bandaris are the only Iranian population thus far analyzed which show a bit of ancestry deriving from a sub-Saharan African source, as this ancestry is not present in all other Iranian populations. And this is evident from the individual Bandari samples, which are on average 51.1% Iran Neolithic, 20.4% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 14.4% Yamnayan, 7.6% Ong Modern, 2.4% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 2.0% Ancient Sub-Saharan African from Ethiopia, 1.5% Ibero-Mauritian from the Paleolithic, and 0.6% Georgia Mesolithic. Thus, the Iranian Bandaris are indeed one of the most genetically admixed populations in Iran. The last population I will be taking a look at here are the Iranian Jews, and they're on average 40.6% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 33.8% Iran Neolithic, 12.8% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 9.6% Georgia Mesolithic, and 3.2% Yamnayan. The individual Iranian Jewish samples are on average 40.5% Anatolia Late Neolithic, 33.8% Iran Neolithic, 12.9% Natufian Epipaleolithic, 9.4% Georgia Mesolithic, 3.4% Yamnayan, and 0.1% Mongolia North Neolithic. Thus, in comparison to the other Iranians analyzed, the Iranian Jews tend to have more Semitic ancestry, which is reflected by their elevated Natufian heritage. To conclude, in this video I took a look at the genetic origins of contemporary Iranian populations and proved that for the majority of them there is greater than 95% genetic continuity, and what this suggests is that Iran has been very much not affected by foreign invasions, particularly the Arab invasion as well as the Turco-Mongol invasions. In fact, as I showed, contemporary Iranians have greater than 95% genetic continuity for the most part when compared to the Iron Age Iranians as well as the medieval Iranians, and this is on an individual sample by sample level, and what this suggests is that significant continuity has been maintained in the Iranian plateau since the Iron Age. Of course, there are some outliers, but these are in the minority, as the majority of the Iranian samples analyzed have been proven to have significant genetic continuity. Thus, contemporary Iranians are indeed the direct descendants of the ancient Iranians. That is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.